All right. So thank you for being here again, everybody. Um, I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about for a little while, and and my exploration sort of veered into a slightly different direction. Um, but I'll tell you where I started. I started with the weather, and and I'm going to share with you whatever I've discovered this week or over the last week or two while I was thinking about this. And then at the end, please we'll open it up to share for comments and thoughts. And um, anyway, I did a bit of reading and have a combination of what I read and what I shared as my own thoughts here. But I started with the weather, oddly enough. And it wasn't really about the weather. It was how do we react to the weather? How do we respond and relate to the weather? And I was just thinking about um, so like there are those people out there that just the weather is so important and everything is, oh, it's hot today, it's cold today, whatever it is today. And it's like they're never satisfied. It doesn't matter what it is, it's it's there. And they just to sort of fixate on that. And and I took a little pride, which was really not warranted, in the idea that, wow, well, I don't really do that. I deliberately don't do that. I don't get in the elevator and find myself just, oh, it's too hot, oh, it's too cold, or this and that. I just took a little pride in the fact of that. And actually, that's to my detriment because there's so many times that I really could use an umbrella. And frankly, I don't bring it because I haven't checked. I just sort of assume it's like it was yesterday, and then that's what I do. And then it usually works out fine. And I thought, oh, look how good Phil is doing at this stuff. It's kind of funny because then I really started thinking about my internal weather, which is really where this is going. Um, what I mean by that is my own state of mind. And I got a lot of work to do. I'm so far from like, oh, this weather thing is so easy. Well, sure, the outdoor weather is pretty easy. Um, but in terms of the state of my mind, there are many, many mornings, to be honest, where I wake up and my mind is just running in so many directions, and I don't really particularly enjoy that. And I'd rather get back to sleep and off and running it goes. So I've begun to ask myself, what's the weather like today, Phil? That's kind of the way I start the day. And I don't mean the real weather, I mean the emotional state. What's my mind state? And I think that that's helpful for me because I can somewhat look at it a little differently instead of being immersed in it. And I can say, oh, look at that. You're thinking about that news story you just heard last night. And look how that's going and going. Instead of being like, oh, that news story, I really wish this, I really wish that. So, we like to think that we have control over our minds. And like the weather, we really have very little control over what arises in our minds. We can feel sad and happy and angry and jealous in 1 minute, and we can desire something and despise something in another minute and be fearful in another minute. And when we understand why we feel these feelings, they do have less power over us. And I think that's the basis of psychoanalytic work. I'm probably telling people things they already know, but this is how I've explored this topic. So hopefully it'll be helpful to you. Um, so, understanding why. Why do I feel this way? Why am I thinking about this? Well, okay, there's a lot of causes and conditions. If I watch the news right before I go to bed, there's a good chance that that's going to be on my mind not long from, when I wake up in the morning. So there's things that happen that way. And I'm a tremendous believer of psychoanalytic work. And I, spend many, many, many hours of my day trying to figure out why this and why that. Uh, but sometimes that's not enough for me. And I find myself seeking something more, another way to get to peace without always knowing the answer to why is this and why is that. So how can we live peacefully with our kind of invisible mind, you know, that we have so little control over? And here's a clue. The Dharma teaches us that we can, when we learn to see clearly what our mind experiences, we can gain freedom from the untamed ways of mind. So that differs from asking why. And it's more about looking than seeking an answer. That's at least that's how I get it. And I think that can be very, very powerful. And I think the Buddha was so far ahead of his time. And I think he's ahead of our time too, in terms of this. But current neuroscience, has a catchphrase about that, which is things that, I lost my place on it. I said things that fire together, wire together, thoughts that fire together, wire together. Basically what you think of is the inclination of your mind. That's what the Buddha said. The Buddha said it as, whatever you frequently think and ponder upon, that will become the inclination of your mind. So most of the times we're at the mercy of whatever subject happens to present itself to us. And we're not so much thinking as we're being thought. So with practice, when a thought occurs, we can learn to choose whether or not to follow it. I think that's what the teaching is, leading us towards. I also think psychoanalytic work can lead us towards that, but the teaching, leads us to make choices as opposed to just following what's in front of us. And we can learn to keep our thinking when we can learn, not when, we can learn to keep our thinking as close to our direct experiences when we do this. And I think that's important. We can really get in touch with what we're directly experiencing. That can help us see what's going on. These little choices that we make of whether we follow or not follow where our mind is kind of leading us can really add up over time. And we may not see that right away, but speaking for myself, I can say that humbly I've noticed a lot of personal growth and spiritual growth over the years since I've been practicing regularly. So with that, I started looking at letting go and letting be. And so often in our practice, we talk about letting go. And relinquishing is a basic principle of Buddhism. It's great. But sometimes we can say, let it be, instead of letting go. And I think that has a slightly different quality. And with let it be or let be practicing, we practice non-rejection. And we practice working with and staying with whatever is here. So I'll try to explain that a little further. And this is really my thoughts about this, and so you can take it with your grain of salt if you like. But I see let it be as an open-hearted practice of simply being present and seeking nothing. And it exposes us to our inner experiences. And by result, that can lead us to the true nature of things, the true nature of things that we're experiencing. Let it be offers us an opportunity for peace and stillness and spaciousness without using mental energy to try to change things, which for me is often what happens. I often trying to solve a problem, a made up problem even. I don't have to do that. And it gives me room and it's not beholden to time. And I feel like I am simply just living. This body and mind is here, alive, doing whatever it does. There's no need for striving. There's no need to have a purpose. There's no goal. There's no right or wrong. It allows me to process feelings that I've been experiencing. And boy, in this world where there's so much that goes on, I think that's a gift. We can give that to ourselves. For me, it's a gift. If I can take some time and sit still and then get a little bit more in touch with whatever's been spinning around all day long, all that information, which we take in, it's hard to process it all. And we're not machines. We're beings. We're human beings. So with Let It Be, we let our mind, body observe, and really that's it. And I love sitting that way when I can. And we can lightly observe our mind, and we could observe our sensations in our body. We could observe the sounds, smells, and we could observe our feelings and emotions. Pretty much that covers the whole gamut of what living is as a human being. It's our minds, our bodies, and our feelings and emotions. And of course, every single one of these things come and go. That's the nature. And we can see them for what they are. We don't have to try to hold them. We don't have to do anything. And our mind body does this for us. If you just leave it space, we don't have to work to say, breathe now. Your body's going to breathe now. You don't say, hear now. If there's a sound, you hear the sound. You have a feeling. It's just, this is how we work. At least how I see it. So it's that now when we're doing what I'm calling Let It Be practice, is that we're paying attention with the least amount of interference, and we're stepping back to watch. And because there is little to no interference, we could better experience the present moment. And again, in these moments, we don't yield to desire. We don't seek to push anything away or hold on to anything. We just watch what's happening. And we don't watch too hard. We don't go, oh, let me really see what's happening. We just sit back and experience. Watch the show. And with that, we can find that our mind and our body can be on our side and we can be on their side. Can be on our own side. We don't have to struggle. Something comes up that we don't like, it's come up. We can let that be. Something comes up that we like, okay, we can let that be too. We don't have to hold the things we like. We don't have to shove away. Let's say there's a pain in your knee while you're sitting. Okay, there's a pain in your knee. Instead of going, oh, my knee hurts, oh no, what should I do? And do something about it. You can go, my knee hurts. You can look at it and go, what does that feel like? And if it really hurts and you need to adjust, then you adjust. You can work with yourself that way. You can befriend yourself. And then again, without all the usual disturbances, sometimes we see things with more clarity than we ever would have before. Now, I know this happened to me. Maybe if you have heard the story, and maybe I'll just tell it anyway. Early on in my meditation, in the first maybe 6 months or so, I was very, very angry at my brother for how harmful he was to me when he did his certain things. And then there was one moment that something happened to me where it wasn't towards anybody, but I went from being very happy to very angry in a split second because somebody cut me off while I was driving. And then when I was sitting in the meditation, a little while later, I realized, oh, that could happen to me in a split second. That happened to my brother in a split second too. Wow. And while I don't, appreciate what he did back then, it's led me to forgive him in my heart for this. I won't forget what happened. It was an awful time, but I if compassion grew out of that. I don't know how that would have come if I wasn't sitting and just letting things happen. All of a sudden, boom. You can't look for these things because I don't think they're going to come when you search for them. But every now and then, something really amazing can come out of just letting be and letting your mind, body do what it does. It happens on its own. And I think I'll say this is silent wisdom. Um, so I mentioned be on your own side. This comes from Rick Hanson. And I think letting be, we get to know ourselves better and we could practice being on our own side. And who better to be your biggest and most understanding confidant? Who would know you better? There's no other. So, so we're all individuals, and yes, we have many, many similarities. We also are unique in many ways too. I want to sort of steer over to society. Our society puts a lot of pressure on us to meet certain ideals that may not match who we are individually. That could be you need to act a certain way, or you need to have certain skills and have certain abilities. And these pressures can be right in our face. They can be on advertising, pictures, or it can be subtle on your job where there's certain expectation that you need to look a certain way or be a certain way, or act a certain way, or be available at a certain time of day, or what have. These are real pressures and they're real expectations with consequences, especially when we don't fit that established norm. But in reality, we don't all have the same approach to solving daily life. You know, um, whatever, you might put your first shoe on and then put your second shoe on and then tie them, and or you might put your first shoe on and then tie it and then do the other one. Whatever it is, it can be something really simple, something big. We don't always do things the same way because we've learned what works for us. So there is no imaginary standard set of capabilities and problem solving styles that we all have. And when we try to fit ourselves into somebody else's idea of what we ought to be, it can be really harmful. So why I'm talking about this is because when we practice letting be, we can befriend ourselves and we can begin to see ourselves more intimately. And we could appreciate ourselves for who we are. And we could also see where our strengths are and where we have challenges. And maybe we can accept that and realize we're okay. So I think this is a really valuable way to look at things. And then you can fit into your work world or your school world or your, deal with it. But when you know yourself and you know what works best for you, then you can begin to open to accepting or rejecting the outside ideas and the outside worldview. There might be some great ideas that others have. Maybe be open to them. And maybe they're not right for you. Then let them go. Let them be. And be more comfortable in your own skin. Okay, so hopefully everybody's still with me on this. I hope it's helping or it's useful. I don't want to ignore a part of this when it comes to, say, sitting and saying, let it be, being still like that. It's not always full of roses, When I look inwardly, there are certainly times that I'm running from uncertainty or I'm jittery or I'm avoiding some feeling. So I don't want to miss a little discussion about that. Letting be or letting go can really reveal unsettling things. So how do we keep from struggling, especially when we see what we see happening to be really unpleasant and difficult? And then naturally we have resistance to it. So in this situation, what can you do? Well, what I might say to myself, what beliefs am I holding on to? And what can I do to continue practicing with an open mind? So first, what beliefs am I holding on to? Well, some just very big, broad scope beliefs are here and they'll apply in many situations. I think that I am a solid and permanent being and that all is fine, right? Well, all may be fine, but I'm not a solid and permanent being, and all may not be fine. I think that the things that are disturbing to me shouldn't be happening, and I ought to be able to brush them off with the blink of an eye. Oh, that person said something to me that was very upsetting. How come that's even bothering me? I should have just boom. Well, at this point, I get very closed-minded, and I don't really want to see otherwise. And it's hard to practice with an open mind with that. And I'm going to just, make an assumption I'm not alone in some of these kinds of ways of thinking. Um, but holding on to such beliefs just leads to problems. So when we think we're sad and all is in place in our lives, and then things change as they always do, then we suffer. Basic teaching. But it's hard. We don't like to look at this. So it can be really difficult to look at ourselves in this way, and often avoiding is a response. So what can we do? That's the second part. What can we do? Just some simple ideas. What can we do to get our practice and ourselves back on track? We can be very fearful when we don't know or understand what's happening to us, or when we don't know what is going to happen. Just look at the uncertainty from COVID from the last year. I mean, daily, massive uncertainty. It's still here for many of us. Well, the good news is that we can learn to strengthen our ability to be present with the unknown. With regular practice and with heart-filled practices like loving kindness practice, or Tonglen, if you're familiar with that. With those kind of heart-filled practices, we can gain courage and composure to move forward with our fears. Not to brush them off, but we can move forward with our fears and our negative feelings. And perhaps we can begin to see our wide open, expansive nature rather than closing into that fearful nature. Pema Chodron calls this kind of practice getting your nervous system able to bear those kind of uncomfortable things. Getting your nervous system able to bear those kind of uncomfortable things. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes work, I think. She said it's like as if your capacity to hold that which is unpleasant and unwanted can continue to grow and expand. So can we become familiar, dare we say friendly, with the unpleasant weather? For instance, say you have a heart filled with sadness. Maybe we can shift that to the tender, open place where you feel connected with people and receptive to the world because you feel sadness. Perhaps we can see sadness as human nature. And in some circumstances, get to know it as a connector rather than a separator. Let sadness be instead of letting go. Okay, how about groundlessness? That's one that I certainly have been struggling with lately. Being concerned and not knowing about the future can be a really uncomfortable feeling. So can we learn to live with uncertainty without succumbing to fear? When we fear, our minds and so our ability to survive and thrive become limited, as I said before. But everything is always changing. Things get built up, things get broken down, and the uncertainty from impermanence is really often the cause of great, great suffering. So maybe we can try to look at that in a different way, about uncertainty, groundlessness. Think of something you did earlier today, last night, or yesterday. Doesn't matter what it is. Maybe you made dinner. Maybe you met a friend. At some point, those things were in your future. They didn't exist. That event, that moment didn't happen yet. And then that moment happened. It began, it had its life, and it ended. Now where is it? It's gone. But is it really gone? It's in our store consciousness, say. It's in our memory. And some of these kind of events stand out more than others, and we remember some better than others. But when I think about it, isn't that the way it really works? Nothing is so permanent. We're in an ongoing transition, and we're always in an ongoing transition. A little while later, this session's going to be over. It will have had its beginning, middle, end, and then it can be in our consciousness. Doesn't mean it's not real, it's quite real. But that's what life is about in some ways. It's, Pema Chodron talks about this as like a living bardo, if you're familiar with the term bardo, which is sort of the unknown. If you believe in a future life, if you are, and I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, but if you follow that type of belief, there's the word bardo is describing this transition period. The life is over and the new life hasn't begun yet, and you're in this transition. Well, I love the way Pema Chodron talked about this as is happening all the time. It's not just when you die, there's a living bardo that can happen from experience to experience. You could also look at it as an ongoing transition from the moment we're born to the moment we die. So really what I guess I'm getting at is not knowing the future is normal. And yeah, sometimes it's really, really unsettling. Can I say, I wish it wasn't, but it is. Sometimes it is. So it would be really liberating if we can learn to let the unknown be. Again, can we just be with that? Can we be with whatever's happening? I like to see let it be as a lifeline. That sort of is really helpful for me as a lifeline. It's not an intellectual thing. It does require actually getting in touch with calmness and concentration that we learn in our formal meditation. And also, it doesn't mean that you can't change things. On the contrary, it's just a different way to approach problem solving. You don't have to always go right head into something to see where the answer is. Sometimes you can give some space, give some time, and great ideas might just pop up just when you're not even thinking. And with greater discernment that comes from this, you can make wise choices or wiser choices than you might otherwise. Sort of reminds me of the serenity prayer that you're familiar with that says, you can learn to accept the things you cannot change, have the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So with that, I'll just sort of wrap up a little bit. With this kind of practice, being present with what's happening, you can learn how to live well right now. You don't have to struggle so much with every unpleasant thing. Hold on to every pleasant thing. You can learn to be on your own side. You could practice connecting with open, unfettered, unbiased mind. And if there's trouble practicing this way, you can use loving kindness or Tonglen practices to generate a heart of compassion. You can use generosity. With this, you can get to know yourself, your unbounded self. You don't have to hide the parts you don't want to see. And you can be true and understand who you are more so. And change is always happening, so we can practice getting more accustomed to it. So with that, check the weather, practice regularly. Thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful for all of you and got something from it. Very, very happy to hear comments and thoughts.